All right, welcome to the City Council Ordinance Subcommittee meeting of January 30th, 2019. It is currently 6:07. Councilor Coniff and myself are here. Councilor Zarrett is on his way. So I don't think we have any minutes to approve. So I'll open it up to public speak time. So just say your name and your address for the record.
Okay.
And why you came.
So my name is Nicholas Vatrin. I'm from 127 Acrebrook Drive in Chicopee. And I'm coming to talk about my big pedal bike.
Okay.
People are calling it the Pedal Tavern. Our real name is Pedalin' Party. So here is just a little example I've been using with people since the beginning. Sorry, it's a little messed up. So this is the bike, and these are all the functions with it. And then this is just a little thing of the tour. You guys have been on the trail before. So what we're here for today, the Rail Trail Committee already approved us to use the rail trail. And since it's a bike, it also goes by bike laws on the streets. So what I also brought is 3 pictures to go along with this. What we're here for today is to try to change the ordinance of the consumption laws, the open container laws. So here's a few more pictures I took today, actually. Pulled it out. This is the actual bike. It's at the Delaney house in a garage. And so what we're trying to do, Section 12 of the Easthampton, or Section 6-12 of the Easthampton bylaws state that no person, do you guys know the laws at all?
Read it.
Okay. No person shall consume any alcoholic beverage, nor possess or transport any open can, bottle, or other container containing an alcoholic beverage on any city street or sidewalks owned and or maintained by the city of Easthampton. And it goes through all these different things, all this different literature saying how you can't drink. But at the bottom it says, the city council by a majority vote may temporarily suspend the operation of this ordinance to permit the public sale, use, and or possession of alcoholic beverages and consumption thereof, if any of the locations listed. And in all the paragraphs it has the locations. So what we're here for today is to try to get a temporary suspension of that operation just for our business, and then hopefully something permanent, or just maybe a permit, a year-by-year permit of open container law, or just the bike. A lot of people are weary about it because they don't want people just drinking and bike riding. And it's a little more than that. The reason why I took these pictures exactly are because on our BYOB rides, we're going to be having a sober driver and a host. The host will be placed in between where everyone's drinking. And with the BYOB, people are going to show up with unopened beverages, and they're going to give it to the host. We are then going to put it up in our storage area, and the host will be giving them to open and close. So that's so we can follow them. Everyone on the bike will be tip certified, and as I already am, and that's so they can monitor and maintain the use of people drinking and look for all different things to see if they are intoxicated or getting too intoxicated and things like that. So we are also, I'm working with Representative Carey on doing a Massachusetts amendment of trying to change this rule right here about how no alcohol is allowed in any vehicles except for limousines and coach buses. So we are going to try to put the e-tavern on that, electric tavern. This does have electric assist. And that's what we're here to do.
Okay. So remember, because this is public speak, we can't really ask any questions or comment specifically about this. But I do think that this is something that would make sense for us as a committee to look at. So we'll let you know as that progresses.
Absolutely.
And
So should we then try to get this on the agenda for next Wednesday so that it can be
I can write something up for Barbara,
summarily turned around?
and then they'll come back to our committee, and we can deliberate and go through all this stuff and dig into it. So
yeah, I would really like that, and I thank you guys for having me.
Awesome.
Sure.
Well, we appreciate you coming.
Thanks for
And
showing us.
you don't necessarily have to stick around for Councilor Zarrett to get here, but he should be here soon. But and some of the other things that we're covering are things that he introduced. So
Yeah.
I don't mind. the meat of this will happen after it's introduced to city council, and then the dialogue can start and we can really get into it, but.
Of course.
Yeah, and I can tell you exactly how the process goes. So if I submit something to the city clerk, then it will get moved to the subcommittee's agenda, which then will set meetings for it. And then because it's an ordinance, it would be potentially an ordinance change. It has to go back to the full council for a public hearing.
Yep.
And then I believe it has to have a 2/3 majority vote, something.
For an ordinance?
I can't remember if it's required, but
We'll clarify.
we'll clarify that.
No, it's,
It's not the quickest process in the world, but
Yeah.
I understand. We started this back in July with the rail trail, and then in October with the licensing committee, not realizing we were in the wrong committee until January.
right there you
It's
go.
okay. It's new to everyone, and
That's right.
we're looking to be innovators in Massachusetts because we will be the first.
Okay.
That'd be great.
And
Okay.
Easthampton's already doing some good new things.
Yes, I'm good with that.
We're open to a lot.
Yeah.
I will hang out because I'd like
Sure.
to meet Owen, if you guys don't mind.
No, it's fun. Now, remember, so before when we talked about the consumption, the open consumption of alcohol and cannabis, there was a few questions, and we had just said we were going to go back and take a look at it. And did you have a chance to have any ideas?
No,
Okay.
I'm just being honest.
No, that's perfectly fine. So here's the thing. For me, Owen's going to have to hard sell me on this one because there's already regulation in place that allows people to be fined for using the public. I don't know if we need to duplicate that.
I think it wasn't really, at the end of the day, it was really just another tool for the police to be able to say to someone who has open, they can point to this, all of the same fines would remain in place. It's all the same bad.
Right.
If it's open, it's bad.
Right.
So is it merely a matter of amending? Do we have
So
an
here's the
ordinance
thing.
today on
So
open carry,
it's-
just adding cannabis?
So maybe we just add cannabis to the alcohol one, but the state already has a fine, which I believe it probably already has a fine for alcohol as well, for public consumption. But specifically, it's a $100 fine. It's a civil fine. Like it's a.
What is our alcohol one?
I think it's $50 to $100. I can't remember.
So why aren't we $100?
We might be 100. We changed it not that long ago, and to be honest with you, I haven't gone back and read it. You probably read it.
So you're saying
100 to
Massachusetts?
500.
Oh, is it? Okay.
No more than 500.
All right.
So Massachusetts already has a law for alcohol,
For alcohol,
nothing for
it
cannabis
does for cannabis.
as well.
It does. No, and
Is it just an amendment to theirs that says and cannabis?
no, it just says no public consumption of cannabis.
And the same
Yeah, it says.
fines?
It's really interesting how it's worded, because what it says is that you can't smoke cannabis anywhere where you can't smoke cigarettes. But then it says, and you can't smoke it in a public place. And I see people smoking cigarettes in a public place all the time, and they're allowed, like if you're on the sidewalk,
Right,
you're allowed to smoke cigarettes there.
yeah, and they're not
Right.
open carry, so
Right.
yeah, so
So there's a little bit of discrepancy there, but I did do some research and I read some articles, and I'm happy to forward them to you. Like one was in the Boston Globe like a couple months ago, and it was basically saying that police are more concerned about education than they are about public consumption.
Yeah.
And that when they catch somebody, they just say, you can't do this.
Yeah.
And if you keep doing it, you'll get a $100 fine. And that's like their main tact.
and I think that's what the chief was saying.
Right.
They just want to be able to point to something
Right.
that
But
says you can't do that,
which they can do right now.
but it doesn't say cannabis.
It does. Yeah.
Our ordinance.
Well, it's not our ordinance, but it's the state regulation.
Okay.
So they can say, this is a $100 fine.
So here's where I'm getting kind of gummed up.
This is-
If the state already has an open carry alcohol, why do we have to have an ordinance for open carry alcohol?
Because I think
I
ours
think
is more.
I think Owen is trying to create consistency.
Okay, I mean, and that's fine. If that's what it is, then
Because
that's
we could
fine.
say the state already has an open carry alcohol thing, why do we need to have it?
True, because I believe ours is a little bit more restrictive.
Then maybe we need to have a more restrictive, I mean,
True. But I'm just saying, if
those are the finer details.
if the argument for having this ordinance is to say we want to tell people that they shouldn't be allowed to do it,
They're being told.
or they'll be fined.
That's
already exists.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying.
If we want
to make it more punchy, but then again, here we're talking about, potentially looking at loosening alcohol public consumption. Are we really at the same time gonna tighten?
I know.
And
That's a valid point.
And as we move into this, I think one of the questions that if we do decide to bring this forward, are we going to have a similar provision for, cannabis bike?
I was just going to say, biking with weed.
That's your second bike, I guess.
Same one, different use.
Yeah, right. So anyway,
No, I hear you.
But I'm hoping Owen will be here soon, and maybe he can shed some light on this. Because I was trying to justify. I'm like, do we really want to pass ordinances if we don't have to?
Right. No, Yeah.
It's like, let's pass ordinances that make sense and are filling a need.
As opposed to just checking.
As opposed to just being like, hey, we did this.
Yeah, look at us.
Right. We're super
State
cool.
will go,
Super
yeah,
cool.
so did we.
Right.
Page 15.
Right.
So back.
Yeah.
What you said, but we said it before you did.
Yeah, right. We said it more forcefully.
Yes.
And so I think that Owen can help us with that, maybe.
And maybe he thought this was at 6:30.
I told him we were downstairs, and I confirmed with him that it was at 6.
Okay.
So.
Wow, usually he's like panic-stricken, and I hope he's okay.
I know. I was gonna say that little squall came through pretty quick.
I know.
Did you get caught in it at all?
Yeah.
That was.
Top of the hill, fog, and you couldn't see what.
No, it was just like white out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that should be.
People talk to me about a cannabis bike. I tell people, well, why would people want to pedal?
Point
You'd be
is to
surprised.
get getting a lazy boy at that point.
That electric assist will be used.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you want to do
I asked. Oh, you want to
adjourn for a couple minutes until he gets here?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll take
Motion to adjourn temporarily.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Okay. Ordinance Subcommittee meeting of January 30th. We are reconvening, and we have Councilor Zarrett with us. And so where we left off, we were discussing the cannabis and alcohol consumption. And I just wanted to see if you had found out any more information about the state law that is the $100 fine for open consumption.
Oh, no.
Okay.
I forgot about that. No.
Okay. And also, do you remember what our current the city ordinance around open consumption of alcohol? Is it a sliding scale fee?
Well, anything's a sliding scale fee. So if you look,
sliding scale fine.
yeah, I mean, if you look at the way that the language is, these to look here, but fines not exceeding. Is
Okay,
basically
yeah,
the way it is. So, and I spoke with the chief about here. This is just printed these out again because I think the way that they were formatted last time were kind of.
Is this your version or the state's version?
This is my version.
Okay.
But the way it was printed out last time, I remember we were talking. There were letters that I didn't know where they came
Not
from.
part of the language.
So basically, I had a discussion with the chief about this, and obviously it's I think to some degree in good faith, but I did express to him the concern that why not first of all, they don't have to impose a fine at all. This is alcohol.
Okay.
They don't have to impose a fine at all, right? They can. So I had a discussion with him about, well, do we need language for a written warning? And he said no, because
Right.
that's part of. They can arrest, they can warn, they can fine, and they can fine up to the maximum amounts that are detailed here.
Okay.
I thought that the previous fines were small. I think they were outdated, and I think it just empowers the police to levy. It empowers them to levy more reasonable fines based on behavior and location.
Is that 622 or should it be 612? Because this is 612 for alcohol. is this a completely separate amendment, or are you,
Yes, cannabis and alcohol, 2 separate amendments.
okay, so we currently have 21, and this will be the 22nd, is what you're saying?
I have to look. I might have miss.
I'm just wondering if we're amending this one to include cannabis,
No.
or it's a brand new,
It's
separate,
brand new.
doesn't have anything to do with this? Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay, then it's probably 22. Okay.
Yeah, I think that I'd have to look which one alcohol.
So
is.
here's where I'm at right now. So I want to know, as we look at, from the research I did, it seems like most municipalities, most police departments are using a educate first, fine second, currently. For example, in Boston and more populous areas.
Right.
And so what they're doing that with is basically they're saying, hey, most people are, unaware that they're not supposed to, because there's confusion around. They're unaware that they're not supposed to be smoking in public, because actually the state law states you cannot smoke cannabis products anywhere where you cannot smoke cigarettes or in public places. So that language is implicitly ambiguous, because you would infer that if you're not allowed to smoke it where you're not allowed to smoke cigarettes, well, what does that mean to a lot of people? Which is, if you're allowed to smoke cigarettes somewhere, then you're allowed to smoke cannabis. Does that make sense? So I guess my question is, if we have that tool right now, why do we need to add a tool on top of that?
Well, because again, it gives us enforcement at the local level.
Okay, I mean, but that's still, that $100 fine is a fine that's issued locally.
Issued locally, but collected at the state level.
See, that's what I want to know, because I don't, like, if I jaywalk and a police officer writes me a jaywalking ticket, I don't think that money goes to the state. That's a state law violation.
That's one of the reasons I included an open container alcohol penalty, because we didn't have a local one. I'll look again.
Okay, because I know we have a.
This is something I talked to the chief about. That's the problem.
I did ask him to come, but he said he was in Westfield and you probably might not make it.
That's okay. So that's one of the reasons that this gives us the power of not only of local enforcement, not only for the sake of writing our own ordinances, but also for the sake of collecting local fines. If it comes to that, and the intention of this is not so that we can collect more fines.
Right.
The intention is just to give us local tools.
Okay. Well, I would like to have clarification on that.
Sure.
So I think that's something we'll have to ask.
Make a note
And last time when we did ask Bob, it seemed like he was unclear of the state fine. But as I can forward you guys one of the articles that I found, which was Boston Globe a couple months ago, and basically they were saying how different police departments were approaching public consumption.
Right.
And it was like the majority message was they're going to educate first, and then if someone's being a repeat offender or being disrespectful, then they'll levy the fine, the $100 fine.
And I think that's Chief Alberti's intention too, for the conversations I had with him when we met to work on this, is that it's not his intention to bust people for consuming, and alcohol too. And I think the intention is to, again, have as broad of an authority as possible, in the case that you tell someone, hey, knock it off.
Right.
And they
do it over and over.
They do it over and over. They're repeat offenders, or they push back.
Okay.
But I could look at if I remember correctly it sounds like you did more research than I did. If I remember correctly about the state fine, because that came out around the time when we decriminalized.
I think you're right, and it's funny. I searched and searched and searched for it.
Right.
And it was I couldn't find the actual MGL. All I could find was references to it.
Yeah.
But none of the references gave me the chapter or area that the MGL was in.
I'll look it up for you. Yeah, I remember at the time what was happening was that it was $100. It's a $100 fine. It's a non-criminal $100 fine.
Right, civil.
Civil fine. Thank you. And then it's up to the individual municipalities if they want to have anything on top of that.
Right. If they want to have additional fines. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I apologize. I forgot that we were going to look into that.
No, that's no problem. I mean, I think unless you're in a super rush, I think if we can answer some of these,
I want to do this right.
yeah, if we can answer some of these questions before we start moving it along, I think would be good. And I think having Chief Alberti here would be helpful.
I agree.
And honestly, I feel a little negligent that I just started like doing more research on this, just because I had a little time. But now I want to dig into this more, and because like for example, I want to know the difference between the state alcohol open container law and our local alcohol open container law, and if we look at making exceptions to that, I think we should be looking at making exceptions on both sides. For open container and public consumption, things like that.
Well, and that's why I basically made these mirror images of each other.
Right.
So what we didn't have locally was a local vehicle open container alcohol thing.
Okay.
Alcohol ordinance. So I included that. That's
Yeah, I saw that back. It was $500.
and then again, it's all about parity. So the fines run in parallel. The
Yep.
ability to suspend the ordinance runs in parallel.
Now here's a sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
But
You're the
the question is popping into my brain right now, which is, all right, so if we have an open container, I mean, open container I know is I believe an arrestable offense.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone gets caught with an open container of cannabis or alcohol in their car, does the officer have the discretion to just levy the local ordinance, the fine of $500, or the state ordinance, the state law, or both? And if it's both, does it compound? And is the compounding nature
101, 100 the other.
right? That's what I'm saying. Like, does the compounding nature make it, unfair?
No, so I don't know if this is the correct answer, but my thought is no. That's the purpose of being able to craft your own local ordinance.
Okay.
And so no, it's in lieu of.
Okay, all right. So that's another thing I want to make sure that we have.
Yeah, well, we should get Chief Alberti back here.
Definitive
Yeah.
answer on that.
And I just want to go ahead.
So I'm looking up the open container law in Massachusetts. Well, it's technically local code enforcement. And it says, blah, 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 that the discretion of the code infraction is at a municipal level, and that the fine is paid in any amounts shall be payable to the city or town,
Okay.
as the case may be. Now, that's just one
piece of it.
it's like that's code enforcement, not necessarily open container.
Sure.
So
that's something. If you have something to add,
I know I'm not part of this.
that's fine. You can.
I talked to the chief executive officer of the ABCC, and his name's Ralph Sacramone, and he said all open container laws in Massachusetts are subject to local.
Okay, good. That's good to know.
Yeah.
So, which is interesting because that is different than cannabis then.
Well,
Because the state has a fine.
right, correct.
State mandated fine, which it doesn't seem like the state has a mandated open alcohol fine.
I'd have to look. Yeah, yeah.
So it sounds like we have some things to look into.
Yeah.
Is that too much, Owen, or do you feel like those things are reasonable?
I think these are reasonable. I mean, again, the point is, like, you all know about how much of a proponent I am for cannabis legalization and use, and so it's just about responsibility. And
Sure.
with this, it's about doing it right. I would never want to rush anything.
Right.
through.
And my view as the chair is that I'm not against this.
Yeah.
But I want to make sure that are we passing ordinances that we need to pass, that are
Right.
filling a need, and are we passing ordinances that are, something that is not already enforceable?
Yeah.
So that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. So the alcohol one, I mean, for the most part, the only thing that was changed was the
vehicle.
fines and the vehicle.
Right.
So that brings into our municipality the ability to enforce open container vehicle, and then
Sure.
again plays around a little bit with the fine structures
Yep.
and things like that.
Okay.
And then the cannabis one again is just from my perspective in my conversations with the chief. chief was that if we're going to be on the forefront of cannabis retail and potentially social consumption spaces, we're also going to want to have to make sure that we're creating the appropriate municipal enforcement framework too.
Sure.
So that was my only thought.
Okay.
The other thing I'll add quickly is something that Councilor Coniff and I discussed last time. Was it was mushed together in one paragraph. On the version you have, I separated out, was that there's a discussion about relaxing, suspending the rules in order to allow use in parks.
Yeah.
And so it's still a little confusing, but my interpretation of it is that in very specific places, Nantucket Park, Millside Park, and Pleasant Green, the Parks and Rec Department has overlapping jurisdiction there in terms of like if someone wanted to have a party and have alcohol in the park, or have like someone actually selling sales concession use, whatever. You can apply to the Parks and Rec Department for in fact, you probably have to. I'm assuming that's what they have to do for Mill Pond Live.
And I don't think this isn't new necessarily, right?
This is not new.
This was in there.
There was just a discussion about like if there's redundancy, and I guess my answer would be yes, there is, but there's also it's kind of like to some degree their jurisdiction. I probably wouldn't want to necessarily step on toes there.
Right.
But there's kind of other option where more broadly outside of just those locations, the city council can also suspend the ordinance.
Okay. Well, I think one thing that we could potentially put in there is a parity, which is that if they receive 5 applications for cannabis and 5 for alcohol, and they approve the alcohol ones but don't approve any cannabis ones, that they have to approve a number equal to the ones for alcohol for cannabis. Do you understand where I'm going with this?
I know where you're going, and I think that's the concern that's been expressed, is that could there be presented, depending on the contents of a board, a bias against cannabis versus alcohol. And I think that
It's hard.
I think it's a discussion.
We can talk about it.
I think one option. Yeah, I think it's something we have to talk about.
Okay.
And I think that's where that overlap comes in, where you could theoretically maybe appeal to the city council if they feel someone felt that they were. But we'd have to talk about how that would work. And I mean, frankly, maybe we have to have a meeting with John Mason.
Yeah.
Does he vote on the board too? As
Sure,
director?
if he's voting, he might be. I think he sits on the board.
Yeah. So I mean that certainly crossed my mind, and I mean I think that you'd also have to assume that the board members are treating these types of things fairly and not expressing explicit bias.
I'm just,
safeguard bias.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
I'm saying
if
we build it in, then it mitigates bias.
Yeah.
So that's the only reason I mentioned it.
Yeah. So I don't know if I mean because my thought with these things is that they would be a case by case basis. So it might be hard to say, well, if you allow one event that serves alcohol, you have to allow an event.
But I'm saying like maybe a review by an outside, whether it's the city council.
Yeah.
And said, oh, well, they got 5 applications for, outdoor cannabis consumption, and they got 10 applications for alcohol. They approved 8 for alcohol and 0 for cannabis.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I think for either, what's lacking here is the language that they probably, in the case that they reject it, they have to give a really good reason why.
What is their methodology for approving it?
Sure.
So so that's something we could add.
That's something we can add.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that.
Cool. Well, I mean, those are basically the questions I had.
No, they're all good questions.
And how about, do we have anything new with the equity?
So I changed the name to Parity because there's already there is already within the state a social equity program.
Right.
So I spoke with Planner Bag, and I don't know if you had this from last time. I spoke with Planner Bag, and you guys probably do have this.
Yeah.
And so or can he suggest, was it him? No, it was, I spoke with Shalene Tidal, who's the commissioner of the
She's the
CCC.
commissioner, yeah.
So she likes, first of all, I did share this with her, and she likes the layout. She suggested changing the name from, even though the implied understanding is that these are equity licenses,
Yep.
to change it to something other than the word equity, because we're also referencing a program that's called the Social Equity Program within the potential list of applicants.
Okay.
And so I decided to call it the parity, or, you know.
Yeah.
And so I've been talking to Jeff Bagg, and so our biggest question last time, and correct me if I'm wrong, was basically if one applies for a parity application for a special permit, how do they basically prove that they deserve to be? And so I jotted down some, at the end here, I just kind of jotted
Some
down
ideas.
quickly some ideas that they basically have to submit, like a cover letter stating, you know, why they feel that they fall under this application. Actually, what did I say?
You said-
They include a cover letter saying the category under which they're applying, which would basically be, if you look,
Yep.
there's
You have these
somewhere, yeah, these different categories. Why they feel that they meet that criteria, and then any material supporting how they meet those criteria. And then I did speak with Jeff Bagg, and because I said, well, if someone submits an application, is it reviewed to make sure it's complete? And so that would be part of the initial review process, basically. And so, and I guess theoretically too, you can even add another stipulation in there that the planning board at their first meeting to review the application would go over all the criteria and verify that they meet the criteria.
And so, no, I mean, I think this is good because basically gives them priority review. So what if do we have anything in here? Forgive me if I missed it.
That's okay.
Where, like, say there's 5 applicants, but all of them are parity applicants. How does that work?
There is something in there. It's just by order that was received. I was trying to decide if I wanted to try to create hierarchy among like those, like as a social empowerment applicant.
Right, more. Yes.
But I put it in there. That's just the order that
Or if they've been residents for lifetime rather than a year. Or,
yeah, I think that's a tough one.
It is. Yeah. I think it's interesting. I like it.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely the big thing that they're doing on the state level, and I wanted to try to
If you can mirror that and have more equity across the applications, so it's not. I think that one of the concerns that some people have is that all of these are just going to be, like. Netta got bought by a company from Georgia, and it's like all of a sudden it's going to be just big business, and we're not going to have any local. So I think this could potentially mitigate that a little bit.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, and especially with theoretically we're going to have to create separate licenses for social consumption if that happens. And actually, there's a bill that was just introduced to potentially. Change the process to enact social consumption from a
so you wouldn't
ballot
have to do
ordinance.
ballot?
And so that could become, and actually the CCC was supposed to render an opinion. So.
I thought that they were too, yeah.
Yeah, but anyhow.
So that, I mean, so what are we waiting on for this? We're just waiting on Jeff to give his final review and recommendation?
Yeah, so there's a few things. So he came back to me and suggested that, I asked him if he could be here tonight, but he's a busy guy.
Yeah.
He suggested that they all have to have gone through the social equity training program, except that's only open to a narrow scope of people.
Right.
So when we talk about minority business and women-owned business and local, they wouldn't be allowed to.
Right.
So while I thought that was a great idea, I don't think that would work.
Because it's basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to take away some of the barriers.
Correct.
And that puts up another big barrier.
It does, and it narrows the group again then too. So
okay, so we need to.
So I'm just waiting for him.
I think we also need to agree on the number of retailers. Like we have replaced 10.10.4.4. No more than 8 cannabis retailers shall be allowed within the city. What is it today? Is it 6?
It's 6.
So,
So I removed 1 and added it over to the, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
no, so I'm trying to understand, are we in agreement that that number should be 8? Because now so essentially we're opening up 2 more slots for parity.
Yeah, well, 3 technically, because I'm taking 1 away from, I'm recommending taking 1 away from the current group.
So 5 regular, 3 parity.
Yep, and then any more
8
that are
total.
added have to be, you have to have a 1-to-1 ratio before, if we down the road create 10, those 2 will have to go to parity, and then it has a 1-to-1 ratio after that.
So my thought, I don't even know what it is that we had agreed on 6. So it doesn't matter who owns it. We'd agreed that the city could support 6 retailers. So again, regardless of who owns them, 8 is now the number. Is that too many for us to adequately support?
Right.
It seems like a lot.
It's a great question.
I mean, I feel like if we leave it at 6, we could go 3-3, 4-2.
I think the only problem is
5-1.
that there's already a bunch in progress, and so we missed the boat to some extent that way.
Well, I think here's my take on that, because I think that's a good point, honestly. I mean, having too much saturation, I think could be potentially harmful. But the way I see it, and maybe this needs to just be codified with language, is that maybe as social consumption comes online, like those would be the extra, because having 6 dispensaries, right?
Yes.
But if you had 4 dispensaries and then 4 social consumption cafes, that seems pretty reasonable.
So maybe we'll
Well,
change it to retailer retailer and social consumption licenses
Yeah,
to
the only-
prepare for that eventually.
The only thing I'd say about that, though, is you're still excluding.
Right. Because if somebody was a parity applicant and they wanted to open a dispensary,
Right.
which, yeah.
I understand what you're saying, Councilor Conniff, and I thought about that too. But what I was most concerned about is okay, well, all we basically potentially have available right now is a single license. Because you can't all of a sudden write a new ordinance that, if I had my way, I'd say 3 and 3. But we can't, because we already have potentially 5 in the pipeline. No pun intended. And so,
Everything
what does that leave?
upon is intended.
But that's absolutely true. So that leaves us with 1 license
That could be
that
parity.
could be parity, and how is that creating equity when you're being like, well, here's 1 license everyone can fight over who's been completely marginalized by the whole industry. So that was my thought, and the reality too is that these are licenses that are going to take years and years for anyone to get. But
right.
I hear what you're saying. I mean, it's going to open up a can of worms, but I just
But it's a. I understand and appreciate the reasoning,
Yeah.
which is the parity piece.
I don't
so,
think it's total sense.
but I do understand. It's,
How many
this is going to be a
Right.
discussion. This is
regardless of how
probably
you
Oh,
chop
yeah.
them up.
this is probably one of the biggest discussions.
I agree.
The other question I had, and it potentially has just gone out of my head, is what had to do with these. Oh, so we have this parity say we agree at 8, 5 and 3, the world's a happy place. What if we never get 3 people? Do
Yeah.
they just sit on the shelf ad nauseum and we have only 5 then? Is there any criteria we can think of? Maybe it's the aging of a license that says after 18 months of nothing,
Right.
anybody can apply for that license.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Well-
I think they did that in Somerville. That they had a 2-year expiration. Well, but then again, you're saying you're setting these aside for equity, and then you're removing that equity.
Okay, well here's a thought. Well, maybe it's not even a thought, but so one of the things we did for years was when there was no liquor licenses available, we did a legislative license. So what if we just had a process in place where if a parity applicant wanted to come forward, they would come to us and we would do a legislative through us, a legislative license that would add, for that parity applicant, they would add an additional license.
Up to a cap.
Up to a cap.
So you mean removing setting aside a certain amount?
Yeah. Just saying when a parity application comes,
We
they
fast track
it comes to us, and we increase the cap if the parity application meets all the
By a
criteria.
majority vote of the city council?
I mean,
that's what we did
you
with
run
legislative
the
licenses.
risk of the city council going
Changing
rogue
composition.
and saying,
Yeah,
no,
right.
you can't have one.
Then we'll have to explain that
Yeah.
to a parity applicant.
That's an interesting pathway to explore. I'd say, what were we gonna say?
No, I was gonna say let's think about that, and because I think it could be a potential way to skirt this difficult conversation that will be difficult at the council level.
It will be. I will say that some of the people who I thought it would be difficult with, I've had conversations with, I think there's reasonable buy-in because they understand the intention of this.
Right.
But yeah, it will be. But
And it was a model that we've used for years with alcohol licenses.
Yeah.
We just had to go to the state legislature. In this case, it just has to go to ordinance.
I think that's an interesting thing to talk about, though.
It is an interesting thing to talk about. I think that, I do think that potentially creates barriers.
Okay.
I like it.
Think about
Yeah.
it. Let's think. And Peg, did you have another piece that you wanted to know about?
Let me
Yep.
just write that down before I forget.
Okay.
So
You can always go back and watch this riveting video.
vote. So you'd have to put language in there that so an applicant can approach the council and by a majority vote be allowed to apply for.
So basically, it would be us raising the cap by 1 for that application.
So 6 would be off, fat,
Six-
dumb, and happy doing their thing.
6 would be doing the
And then
thing.
number 7 comes in and we go, ooh, okay,
It's a parity
now
application.
we're lifting the cap at 7.
We will, through the process of coming through ordinance and going back to the council, we will amend the cap for parity application.
6 stays 6, but parity applications as they come in will do maybe 4 more at most.
Maybe. I'd say maybe. I'd say keep that in your back pocket because I think it'd be better to set the licenses aside because you could run the risk of a council that would be an interesting amendment to offer if the 8 licenses gets blocked.
Gets blocked, yeah.
And then
It's just another pathway.
it is another pathway, and I think it's a great idea. I like because theoretically you could then have a legislative body at some point where they're saying no, we're not going to do that.
Well, then why
Which is
don't
fine.
we, then we could just be more specific about this. 6 cannabis retail licenses plus 3 or 2 equity licenses. And
Yeah,
that way,
parity
once
licenses.
the 6 ones get used up, don't even look at the other 2 unless you're a parity
Unless you're a
applicant.
parity applicant.
Well, that's why I said 5 and 3. That
But I mean, we should specifically use that language and say 5 for,
For-
and then plus 3, as opposed to just saying 8.
Yeah.
I know, but that's
They're not equal.
That's the way it's worded now.
I think it says 8.
Not that the section you just handed me says 8.
Yeah, it says no more than 8. It doesn't have the
Applications for special permits for retailers shall be subdivided into 2 groups: parity and non-parity. Special permits will be apportioned to 5 non-parity. So there's a total of 8.
Yeah, so I would put that section
Up the top.
up at 10.4.4.
So put that up there.
Yeah, it just clarifies it.
Okay, that's fine.
Because
Yeah.
otherwise it'll...
People like me won't read the second paragraph.
You get the 8 and stuff. Yeah, so...
All right,
Yeah,
and then we could. Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay.
Yeah, so it does
Alright.
do that.
Okay.
So let's
Got
So we need to get Jeff here.
So let's do these 2 things for next time. Let's get Bob, see if he can answer the questions that we have around public consumption.
Can you state those again?
So one of them was, what exactly is the state regulation for public consumption of cannabis, and where does that money go? What is the law for open container in Massachusetts for alcohol and cannabis, and is our ordinance double dipping, or is that in lieu of, or what is the relationship of that?
One sec.
I think, was there anything else?
No, I think that was it.
Okay.
It was about fines, it was about
Yeah.
double dipping.
Yeah, my thought is with the double dipping was no. I think it's
Okay.
one or the other.
Right.
I think it's all at the, I think the
Yeah, I think,
municipality gets it, they're enforcing it.
yeah, because that's what
Unless a state trooper stops them, then the state can have it.
Yeah.
unless, or if you don't have a code for it, and that's what Bob was saying, was that if you don't have a code for something, it gets enforced de facto by the state law.
All right, so I want to know that.
Yeah,
I want to know that
yeah,
for sure.
absolutely. And then the other issue is that, you know, going back just to the parity applicants, I really have to go to my house. Alex, can you find me a tissue like in the bathroom or something? Going back to the parity application, that then has to go to the planning board.
Right. Yeah. So then it starts the clock.
Right.
And we're gonna debate it together.
Right.
Because it's zoning.
Right.
So that's I expected that.
But here's the thing. Well, I don't know if I can. Yeah, I mean, I think that. Look, I understand what the pushback will be about adding more retail licenses, but these are for marginalized populations.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
if someone wants to
good-
come
good
forward,
intentions, for
yeah.
sure.
If
No,
someone-
I get that, but at the end of the day, these are businesses that have to be sustainable, and we have to be responsible enough to allow licenses to businesses so that they can thrive.
Right.
Well, and I think and I agree 100% with that, and I think that where the reason why I'm on board is because I feel like when social consumption, because I'm feeling like it's not an if, it's a when,
Yeah.
and then those licenses will go to social consumption, and that's going to be a completely different paradigm than the
And is
dispensary.
that fair? That people who are not part of parity get boxed out of social consumption?
I know. There's,
Yeah.
there's talk about that on the state level.
Yeah.
Well, we do have the
Or we
opportunity.
differentiate from a retailer to a social consumption.
And you know what? We can always go back and revisit social consumption if we want to create more licenses for that, if we feel like there's a demand.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of ordinances,
Yeah.
is that we,
Flex
as
and
things manifest, we can adjust them.
Yeah.
Well, I always imagine that the social consumption special applications, there's a whole separate number of licenses.
Well, I think the way that we wrote it was that a license is a license for whatever the purpose is, whether it's a co-op or whether it's I think that's how we did it.
I have to look at that. I think we just said
We just said
retail.
dispensaries?
We just said retail.
Okay.
And I think that when we do have the
Through a social consumption is retail?
Well, it's sold there, so
it's sold, but it's it's like
Yeah.
it's equivocating a package store to a bar.
Okay.
But
So
we do have the
we will
opportunity-
have to address that.
Yeah, but what we also have the opportunity is to get on the ground floor and do it
Yeah.
right.
Absolutely.
That
Well,
way.
hopefully we'll be a pilot community.
Yes, exactly.
You know, so. All right, so I think we have enough to work on, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So
Beautiful. All right, so
thanks.
do you guys want to set another meeting time?
I would love to.
Okay, because I feel like I'm always scrambling at the last minute.
Well, so what days? So Wednesdays usually work best for you?
Wednesdays are pretty good for me. I think
We're off Wednesdays.
the off Wednesday. So like we're looking at the first Wednesday of February is the 6th,
We have a city council.
and then so the 13th, but that's I believe I'm around on the 13th. I'm not around on the 20th.
Well, the 20th is also city council.
Right, so I'm going to be in Paris for that one.
Oh, poor thing.
So either the 13th or the 27th, either of those works for me.
Well, so the 13th is a couple weeks, basically, right?
Yep.
It's 2 weeks.
Do you want to do the 27th?
I already have it in my calendar that we're meeting on the 13th.
Nice.
I mean, so we have to make sure that we can
We
get
have Jeff
Jeff
and Bob.
here, we can get Bob here, we can
Yep.
let them know ahead of time. And is 6 o'clock okay?
6 is perfect for me.
Okay.
Yeah. So do you want to try for the 13th then?
Yeah, let's do that.
Good, it's in my calendar.
Yeah. 6
I
p.m.
must have had a recurring meeting or something.
Right. Okay. Beautiful. So I'll let I can ask Bob again. I'll send out an email to Bob and Jeff, and I'll
Here's
include you.
what we need you.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. And all right. Do I have any motions?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you, Easthampton.